Rebekah. What can we know about her? What is made known by the Genesis author? What can we say about who she was and the experiences that she endured? Rebekah is a character that we meet in the book of Genesis and is told as part of the story of Isaac, Esau, and Jacob in Genesis chapter 24 through chapter 28. From what we can tell from all the available evidence in the Bible and some maybe comparative cultural commentary and witness, we believe that Rebekah would have lived somewhere around the turn of the third millennium BC, somewhere maybe from 2030 to about 1900 BC. We try to understand something about her based upon some relative chronological things. But what's interesting is, as important as Rebekah is in the flow of the narrative, there's not a whole lot that we actually know about her. We're never told how old she is at any point in the text. We can only speculate based upon relative age with her husband Isaac or her children Esau and Jacob. Isaac is a very interesting character in the book of Genesis, because as a character in the book of Genesis, when it comes to what the author of Genesis wants to tell us, he is the one acted upon. He is the one whom Abraham acts upon and the one Jacob is going to act upon. Very rarely does he express much agency in and of himself, just around chapter 26 of Genesis, as we will see. And this is very important as it relates to his wife Rebekah, because in Genesis 24 we are introduced to Rebekah. And the way that we're introduced to Rebekah is that Abraham, now that he is old, now that Sarah has died, wants to secure a future for his son Isaac, to secure a wife for him. He doesn't want him to marry some kind of Canaanite woman. So he sends his slave that he trusts the most, the steward of his household, to go back to Aram Naharaim, to Padan Aram, to that land where Abraham had come from so many years before, up near Haran, in modern day kind of Turkey-Syria border near the Euphrates River. Back to his family, back to his nephew Bethuel, and his therefore niece, great niece, and all the family that he may have there. And so the slave is sent to Bethuel's house, up to that area of Padan Aram, but he doesn't know who he's supposed to look out for. So he asks God for a sign. Says, the girl who comes and is willing to give me water, let that be the girl who I'm supposed to follow. And soon after that, Rebekah comes. He asks for water. She gives him water. She also gives water for his camels. And he recognizes, this is the woman, this is the girl that God has sent me to. What do we know about Rebekah at this point? All the text tells us is that she is a young woman who is a virgin. That's all that we know about her, and that she has a brother named Laban and is a daughter of Bethuel. That makes her Abraham's grandniece, and it makes her and Isaac second cousins. She is Aramean because her father's an Aramean. We have every reason to believe that they are still serving the gods of Terah, still committing idolatry. Why they would do anything else while they're still here at this point. And so Rebekah goes back home. Laban comes and greets the slave, brings him into the house. Before the slave is willing to eat, he has to rehearse the story of everything that's just happened. It's very interesting in Genesis 24, because in the story of Genesis, space is at an economy. The author generally is telling stories very quickly. The fact that he draws this out, tells you what happens, and then tells you the slave's recounting of what happens, is an emphasis telling us that we're really supposed to understand here exactly what Laban and Bethuel conclude from this whole story. In verse 50 of Genesis 24, that Laban and Bethuel reply, "This is Yahweh's doing. Our wishes are of no concern. Rebekah stands here before you. Take her and go, so that she may become the wife of your master's son, just as Yahweh has decided." So we don't know what they think about it in reality. They may be very ambivalent about it. We don't know. They may be happy about it. We don't know. All we know is that they see that this is the work of the God of Abraham, and that the God of Abraham has chosen Rebekah to be the wife for Abraham's son, Isaac. And so, even they don't feel like they have a choice in the matter. And if that's the case, Rebekah has even less of a choice in the matter. The only choice that Rebekah even exercises here is that the next day the servant is ready to go. That slave wants to get back to Abraham, and they protest, we want to have a few days to celebrate and send her off, and he's like, I need to go now. And they ask Rebekah, will you go with him now? And Rebekah consents to go with him now. That's the only choice Rebekah has made in this whole thing. Not if she is going, but the fact that she's going sooner rather than after a few days. And so they go, they travel back to Beer Lahairoi where Isaac is. She looks and sees him. The slave tells her that's who it is. She covers her face in a veil. The slave gets down, narrates everything to Isaac, then brings down Rebekah. And we're told in verse 67 that Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent. He took her as his wife and loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So Isaac, even when it comes to his wife, has acted upon. He has given her to him. And they are now married. Sight unseen, now they are husband and wife. And we're told that when Isaac is 40 years old, he marries Rebekah. We don't know how old Rebekah is. We assume that she's probably at least 15. We're going to say 20 for the sake of argument here. So she's 20 years old at this point, at least, marrying the 40-year-old Isaac. We're told that she is childless for a while. She is infertile, but then Isaac prays and she gets pregnant. And the children are struggling inside her womb. She doesn't realize it, but it's twins. And she cries out to Yahweh about this. Very interesting to note there that she has already now identified herself with the God of Isaac. And Yahweh answers her. 2 nations are in your womb in Genesis 25:23, and 2 peoples will be separated from within you. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. This prophecy will become all the more important as the nations of Edom and Israel develop. This prophecy is much more forward-looking than the individuals in the narrative, but they may have some bearing on these individuals in the narrative, and certainly helps to understand why the 2 go in the trajectories that they do. When it's time to give birth, the first one comes out red and hairy. It's Esau, otherwise known as Edom. The brother is holding on to his heel, and we call him Jacob. They grow up, the Genesis author says there in verse 27. But important note first, Isaac is 60 when they're born. So Rebekah is 20 years older than when she was first married. So now we're looking something like she's 40, something like that maybe. Again, not quite sure. Esau becomes a skilled hunter, and Jacob is an even-tempered man who lives in tents. Isaac loves Esau because he had a taste for fresh game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. We're not told why Rebekah loved Jacob. And we should note it's the only person in the narrative that Genesis author says Rebekah loves. So we're going to see how that plays out here in a little bit. Then we're told about a couple episodes that Isaac is actually acting. In chapter 26, Isaac is finally an actor for a brief point in time. And the first way he's an actor is a situation that, if you remember looking at Sarah and Abraham, a story that will sound familiar. There's a famine. Isaac may be tempted to go to Egypt, but God tells him, do not go down there, stay in this land that I will point out to you, and I will be with you, and I will bless you, and I will give all these lands to you and your descendants. So Isaac stays, and he heads out to be in Gerar of what will eventually become Philistia. It says Philistia here. The Philistines aren't here yet, won't be for 800 years. However, that is the land where the Philistines will eventually end up. And the men of the place ask him about his wife, and he says to them, she is my sister. Because he was afraid to say, she is my wife, because he thought to himself, then the place will kill me to get Rebekah, because she is very beautiful. Now, after he's been there for some time, Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looks out and sees Isaac sporting with his wife, Rebekah, using the ASV, or the very Britishism there. You don't get much more British than that part of the English translation there. Was sporting is actually yashak, which is the verbal form of the verb which Isaac's name is. So there's a play on words. Isaac is Isaacing with his wife. Haha. What does it mean? It could be a haha laugh and mirth. However, when we see the fact that Potiphar claims that my husband brought in this Hebrew who tried to yashak me, to mock, humiliate, there's maybe a sexual overtone there. That's why the NET will say that he was caressing her or a note saying perhaps fondling her. This is a public display of affection. And so Abimelech summons her, like, she's your wife. One of our guys could have married her and brought guilt and shame upon all of us. And so Abimelech sent out an order. Anyone who touches this man or his wife are going to be put to death. Not exactly the same situation like Abraham and Sarah. Close, but not the same. And the importances are pretty different. First of all, it makes it very clear no one actually took Rebekah as wife. We don't even know if Rebekah knew that Isaac said any of this. Isaac said it to the men, but we never told if Rebekah knows. Maybe she knows, maybe she doesn't. It doesn't actually directly affect her in the end. But what's interesting in all of this is that we might see, well, they got this loving relationship, but in the end, all we know is that Isaac loved Rebekah, that Isaac was willing to engage in fondling, caressing in public, or in a place that Abimelech could see him doing that. We don't know how well Rebekah took to that, but we know that Isaac was doing that to Rebekah. It might be a very loving, caring relationship, but it also may not be. We can't tell. We know how Isaac feels about Rebekah, but the Genesis author closes us out from seeing how Rebekah felt about Isaac, except we can know for certain, because of the events of chapter 27, that whatever love, care, and affection she may have for Isaac is secondary to her love for her son Jacob. Why did she love Jacob so much? Is a wonderful, interesting question that we'll never be able to answer. We see that there's this preference. Who started with the preference? Was Rebekah and Jacob the ones who started the preference, and Isaac then started preferring Esau? Did Isaac prefer Esau, and therefore Rebekah wanted to favor Jacob? Was it because Rebekah remembered the prophecy? And did Isaac know about the prophecy? Did Isaac not like the prophecy and disregard the prophecy? Is it a temperamental thing? I think, as we're going to see in chapter 27, Rebekah's temperament very much like her brother and her son. Because in chapter 27, Isaac has grown old. In fact, if we kind of work out the timing here, Jacob and Esau would be about 70. Isaac is probably, therefore, 130 years old, and Rebekah is something like 110. Yeah, he's old. And he wants to bless Esau. He wants to give Esau the blessing. So he sends Esau out to go and hunt game he likes, bring it back, prepare it for me so he can provide this blessing. Rebekah overhears it. And then from chapter 27, verse 5 through verse 17, the Genesis author is going to go out of his way to make it very clear who's the actor here. Rebekah hears about this, so Rebekah calls Jacob. Rebekah then says, Jacob, hey, your Dad's going to give your brother the blessing. This is what we're going to do. Go get 2 goats. I'm going to prepare them the way your father likes. I'm going to give them to you. You're going to go in there. You're going to act like you're Esau, and you're going to get that blessing. And Jacob's like, my brother is a hairy man. I'm a smooth man. Maybe my father feels me and recognizes it's not Esau, and I get called. I get cursed. And Rebekah will go and tell him, any curse against you will fall on me, my son. Just obey me. Go and get them for me. So Jacob here is even reticent about engaging in this scheme. It's Rebekah that's doing this. And then the Genesis says Rebekah will go and prepare this food. Rebekah will take Esau's garments that she's got in his tent for some reason, puts it on Jacob. She then takes the coat of the goats, the calf skin of the goats, puts it on Jacob so that he feels hairier on his neck and on his arms, puts the food in Jacob's hands. You can imagine this whole thing. Rebekah's doing all this and basically just shoves him in to go before Isaac. This is all Rebekah's scheme. This is all Rebekah acting. This is the most we'll see Rebekah do anything in the entire narrative. She's the brains and the action behind this whole scheme. And they pull it off as best as they can. Isaac is sufficiently convinced, has his doubts, sufficiently convinced that he gives the blessing to Esau, who is really Jacob. But the ruse can't last for long, because then Esau comes in and wonders what happened, and they both realize they've been taken. But Esau blames Jacob. Esau doesn't blame his mother. Esau thinks this is all Jacob's idea. And Esau gets mad. Esau wants to kill Jacob. So now, all of a sudden, Rebekah's plan is having complications. And she doesn't want to lose her son, so she tells Jacob, okay, your brother's mad. I'm going to send you to my brother Laban. I'll send for you back when his anger cools down. That's Rebekah's plan. Rebekah then goes to Isaac. Now, we've been told before that Esau has taken a couple Hittite wives that are just driving Isaac and Rebekah up the wall. And so she goes to Isaac, look, Esau's wives are driving me crazy. What if Jacob marries somebody like that? What am I going to do with myself? And that was enough to get Isaac to bring in Jacob and say, hey, don't marry a local woman. I'm going to send you back to my brother-in-law, to your uncle Laban, where you can marry one of his daughters. Go and do that. And so that is how Jacob is then sent off. And Esau hears about this, and Esau realizes, oh, my parents don't like my wife. So he then goes and grabs an Ishmaelite wife, as if having a third wife is going to somehow make that better. Regardless, that's how that story ends up. And so the ruse seems to have worked, but the ruse has come at a cost. Because what Rebekah has done in her machinations, in her manipulations, and having her son in that situation so that he can get the blessing. Now, Jacob is going to go and spend time with Laban. And Laban is going to extort and manipulate him for 21 years. Well beyond anything he intended. Certainly well beyond anything his mother Rebekah intended. And by the time Jacob comes back, we don't hear anything about Rebekah. 21 years later, when Jacob comes back, no mention of Rebekah. The text will say that Jacob will come back to his father Isaac. It will say that Jacob and Esau will bury Isaac when he dies at 175 years old. And when Jacob himself is dying in Egypt, he will reminisce and trying to tell his children to take him back and bury him in the cave of Machpelah. He says, there they buried Rebekah. As far as we can tell from the text, Rebekah never saw her son again after sending him off to live with her brother. That she would have spent the rest of her years, up to no more than 21 years, giving her a ceiling of about 130 in her life, with Isaac and with Esau and all those wives of Esau that she didn't really get along with. That's who she had living with. She had lost her beloved son. She no longer had him with her for the rest of her days because of all this manipulation and machination. This is the way God's purposes was accomplished, was through Rebekah's manipulations, right? That is how Jacob, who was the younger one, received not just the birthright, which he was able to cheat his brother out of with the stew thing, but also the blessing. But it still came to her down upon her. That curse probably came upon her. Was it the curse for having done this was that she would no longer enjoy the presence of her son again. And she then is sending her son to go and suffer the very same kind of machinations and plotting at the hands of her brother that were worked to his advantage when his mother was using it for him. So what can we say about Rebekah? Rebekah's an interesting person that we tend to project upon. We project feelings for Isaac. We project all kinds of things that may have been there, may have been real, but we can't know. But what we do know is she loved Jacob fervently. She loved Jacob more than she was going to honor her husband. And she was willing to deceive her husband and to cheat her oldest son out of the blessing in order for her younger son to get that blessing. We know that she is definitely Laban's sister. She acts like Laban's sister. We know where Jacob gets it from, right? The cheating and the manipulating of circumstances. And therefore, it is very ironic that Rebekah has now basically sent a lamb to be among wolves by sending him to be dealing with her brother. And that would be the reason she would never see him again, which is a kind of bittersweet end to that story. God's purposes were accomplished. They were accomplished through human schemes. That did not stop the human schemers from having to suffer the consequences of their actions. And Jacob and Rebekah certainly did that based upon what Rebekah did. What can we learn about Rebekah? What can we gain from her example? Love to hear your thoughts. Please let us know here in the comments. I'm Ethan. So glad that you've joined us to work with the Venice Church of Christ. We are Christians, disciples making disciples, as part of a non-denominational church in Los Angeles. We'd love to be of encouragement and service to you. We're so thankful that you've given us the gift of spending time here considering Rebekah today. And if we can be of any help, please let us know at VeniceChurchOfChrist.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. And may the Lord bless and keep you until we're able to meet again.